We've had the first conference about banning the nuclear treaty, which was in March. We're going to have another from 15th of June to July the 7th. And in between, we have the first session of the PrepCon for NPT 2020.
Right.
Does this session make any sense?
Well, the Nuclear Weapons Prohibition Treaty process has begun. It is an attempt to advance the goals of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which include the elimination of nuclear weapons under Article 6 of the 1968 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So I expect that by the middle of this summer, the talks on the Prohibition Treaty will be concluded. We don't know exactly what that instrument is going to look like, what the details are. That's still being worked out. But this Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference, Preparatory Committee meeting, is also another opportunity for states to look at the issues and the challenges facing the broader nuclear non-proliferation regime. It's important because there are some important challenges facing the non-proliferation system. Unfortunately, I don't think many of those issues are being discussed in detail here at this meeting. As I look at the non-proliferation system and the goal of nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation, the two biggest challenges that we face today are the problem of North Korea and its growing nuclear and ballistic missile program, and the inability to get to the negotiating table with North Korea to find a way to verifiably halt their nuclear and ballistic missile testing on the way eventually to talks on the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. That is a huge challenge because if it's not solved in the next 3, 4, 5 years before the 2020 Review Conference, that is a major threat to the global non-proliferation system. The other major problem is the inability of the United States and Russia to make further progress to reduce their oversized nuclear weapons arsenals. The U.S. and Russia reached a very important agreement in 2010, the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. It is due to expire on February 5, 2021. So President Vladimir Putin, President Donald Trump will have to decide between now and then whether to negotiate a new treaty to follow on New START, or whether to extend the New START treaty by another 5 years, which can be done without the approval of the Duma or the U.S. Senate, or whether to let the whole thing go and to move into a situation in which the world's two largest nuclear arsenals are not limited by any treaty. That would be very detrimental for the nuclear non-proliferation system. So, these are some of the issues that should be debated and discussed in detail here at this conference. Unfortunately, that's not the focus here. I think that the states that are part of the non-proliferation treaty will eventually get around to these problems, but they have not used this conference here, this preparatory committee meeting, I think, to effectively focus attention on these two major challenges to the non-proliferation system. What strikes me about this meeting is that they're dancing around the edges of all of the difficult issues, and the United States is talking about the threats posed by North Korea, but they're not talking about what needs to be done. The Russians are talking about the Middle East zone issue, and that's important, but it's not going to be solved unless the states in the Arab League and the Egyptians get on the same page, because they are not on the same page at the moment. I mean, it's pretty incredible at the moment. So if we look at the challenges that the 2020 Review Conference is going to face, I mean, if we don't get the United States and Russia back to the negotiating table or extending New START, that's going to be a major thorn in the side. If the North Korean problem gets markedly worse, and it could, that's going to be a major problem. So that's going to make everything else pale in comparison. And frankly, the Prohibition Treaty, which some countries, I didn't really want to spend time on this, but which some countries who are not participating in the talks see as a threat to the NPT, that's not the threat to the NPT. I mean, I think it can be a very useful contribution to reducing the salience of nuclear weapons as a whole by prohibiting their possession, use, development, etc. But the real threat is, if countries are not making good on their commitments
Proliferation.
on stopping proliferation and advancing nuclear disarmament, then the NPT system it could reach a crisis point. And so that's what I see as the danger, and it's just not being discussed in enough depth here.
Now Trump has said he'll be honored to meet the North Korean leader.
It's unclear what the U.S. policy is. I mean, it veers from, and you heard this a little bit in Ambassador Wood's comments. I mean, the United States has been naming and shaming the North Koreans. I mean, they are violating Security Council resolutions. They are violating the NPT, which they're still a member of, technically speaking. They are violating the nuclear test ban norm. And yet they say that the Trump administration sometimes says they want to sit down and talk with the North Koreans. I mean, so, and then the United States is also, like North Korea, rattling their military sabers a bit. You know, the North Koreans do it even more, very threatening, irresponsible statements. So it's not clear to me, and we're looking really closely at what the U.S. policy is in North Korea, what the strategy is, because it is this crazy mix of threats, pressure, and then some kind of openness to talking on terms that we're not exactly clear about. So it's hard to discern
contradictory responses.
I mean, a number of people have observed about the broader Trump administration foreign policy. The only pattern we can see is they're consistent about being inconsistent. It's not unpredictable. Right. It's not so much that it's unpredictable. It's just inconsistent. And that's disturbing to a lot of countries because, the international system requires some predictability. Otherwise, you can't operate in the system.
Right.
All right, we're talking. We had a good conversation.
Yeah, that is great.